Welcome everyone to VetSuccess, empowering veteran employee resource groups, the latest installment of American Veterans Group VetSuccess virtual conference series. VetSuccess is a direct outgrowth of our mission at AVG to make a difference in the lives of veterans transitioning to civilian careers. The VetSuccess conference series was developed because of the impact we knew bringing together folks from across industries and functional areas could have on advancing veteran employment and career success. Our inaugural event focused on bringing together leaders from across the employment landscape, including veteran serving nonprofits, military-focused human resource recruiters, college services, career officers, and veterans to hear best practices and lessons learned for helping veterans transition from the service. The second installment series today zeroes in on how, or this was in the past, and how universities or higher education institutions and organizations can better work together to support student veterans and set them up for success in their civilian careers for our second installment. And then today, for our third installment, we're fortunate enough to have some real heavy hitters here with us to discuss military veteran employee resource groups, or VRGs, the role these groups can play in advancing veteran employment, and how organizational leaders can better support and empower military veteran employees. We've got a great program on tap. I'm very happy to be moderating our panel discussion today, led by an all-star cast that includes Cappy Surrette from Disney Experiences, Lloyd Knight from UPS, and Niel Smith from Amgen. We will hear from our panel for about 30 minutes, and then we will open the floor to questions from you all, so please feel free to drop those in the chat. Just a little housekeeping. If you're having any trouble at all navigating the conference platform, please reach out to Justin Couch via the chat function or directly by email to justin@boldsquare.com, justin@boldsquare.com, which we just sent you via chat. Justin is working behind the scenes to keep the train moving down the track, and he can help with any technical issues that you all might have. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists and we'll get started. So first we have Cappy Surrette, who is a senior manager of communications at Disney Experiences. A highly decorated military veteran himself, Cappy is a retired U.S. Navy captain with more than 20 years of experience in leadership, corporate communications, media relations, crisis communications, social media, speech writing, and internal communication. A military veteran advocate, he is a founding member and serving co-chair of Disney's Veteran Employee Resource Group, known as Disney Salute, which focuses on enhancing the employment experience for veterans and those with a high affinity for the U.S. Armed Forces. He leads reputational efforts and works with veteran nonprofits as part of Disney's enduring support for the military community. He is also a member of the Walt Disney Company Veteran Steering Committee. Next, I'm happy to introduce Lloyd Knight. Lloyd is the Veteran Talent Acquisition Strategy Manager for UPS, based at UPS Global Headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, where he oversees hiring and retention for a 19,000-strong military veteran workforce. He is very active in veteran engagement at UPS, serving many roles, including starting the first veteran business resource group, developing the first veterans management training program, and served as the chairman of the UPS Veterans Council. He is the co-founder and president of Vetlanta, an industry collaboration of veteran-motivated organizations striving to make Atlanta the premier community in the country for veterans and their families. He is a career readiness instructor for 4Block, teaching at Emory University's business school for their Masters in Business for Veterans program. Lloyd is an active volunteer supporting multiple nonprofits, including Leadership, Forsyth American Corporate Partners, Travis Manion Foundation, 4Block, and Hire Heroes. And then last but not least, very excited to welcome Niel Smith. And Niel's the director of program management and business transformation at Amgen, and is a leader in Amgen's Veteran Resource Group. Niel started with Amgen in 2019 and was the company's first U.S. Chamber of Commerce Hiring a Heroes Fellow, a program that helps transitioning veterans find meaningful post-service employment. Prior to joining Amgen, he served 22 years in the United States Army as an armored cavalry officer, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. He served as commander of 6th Squadron, 9th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, an armored reconnaissance battalion of 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood, Texas, deploying to the Middle East in 2017. Niel's military service includes operational and combat deployments to Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, plus additional travels to 46 countries. Other notable assignments include service as a senior military advisor to the State Department's Asia Pacific Bureau, brigade operations officer in Afghanistan, aide de camp to the commander of U.S. Army Pacific, and operations officer of the Army Marine Corps Counterinsurgency Center and company level combat command during the Iraq surge. And he's having technical difficulties, but will be joining us very, very shortly. So without further ado, Lloyd, let's start with you. And as a reminder to all of our attendees to drop suggestions in the chat, we'll get to as many as you can. So Lloyd, through VetLanta, you're plugged into a massive cohort of veteran employees across different companies and functions in Atlanta. Often VRGs are framed as cohorts within an organization. Can you tell us about the difference having a broader region-based network that VetLanta has had?
Yeah, sure, Ben. And first of all, thanks for having me here and the invites. So love to see efforts like this. So really, I started VetLanta out of my 2-year role as the VBRG chair at UPS. And we met for the first time. Honestly, it was 25 white guys sitting around the table bitching about the VA. You know, that was 11 years ago. And now it's crazy. We're 14,000 members, a highly diverse organization, and represent, hundreds of organizations from the government to academia, companies of all sizes, individual contributors. So that has been wonderful. I think one of the reasons, or one of the best things, is making it a more diverse organization and expanding our scope. Is really the diversity of thought. And, at the time when we first started VetLanta, we were all focused on employment. But employment is only one segment of veteran engagement and what the VBRGs are involved with. So I think definitely bringing in a better group allowed us to have more diversity of thought and the overall, picture in the veteran space.
Yeah, thanks for sharing for that. I hear, a lot in the conversations that we've had with others, just figuring out they feel like they could be a little isolated, and they're kind of, on their own trying to, figure out how do they build their VRGs. And so, what I love when we got to, become friends is the different ways, whether it be industry, or through VetLanta, through geographics that you guys have been able to build. And I think that's the best practice that can definitely be scaled nationwide for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And if anybody's interested in, we mentor new VBRGs, or oftentimes VBRGs and employment groups are struggling post-COVID. Maybe they have a new leadership team. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So we'd love to connect you with you. We can give you some of our best practices, lessons learned, and would be more than happy to coach some of those VBRGs that may be struggling.
That's awesome. Hey, Niel, great to see you. I really appreciate you joining us. And as the military veteran community can attest, we take adversity on the chin and figure out how to get stuff done. So we're not going to let
adapt and overcome, right?
Get in our way.
Well, always good to wait on the Army.
Yeah.
Here it goes.
Never underestimate Murphy's Law.
And then I guess, Lloyd, to ask you another question, what are some of the most, common pitfalls folks face when trying to get a VRG off the ground? What resources, are needed to ensure VRGs are successful? And lastly, how can VRGs organizations ensure those resources are accessible?
Oh, I love that question. So the biggest pitfall that employee resource groups face is they try to go external first. Everybody wants to volunteer. They have these, nonprofits, that they're involved in and passionate about, which is good. Community service is great. Don't get me wrong, but really the biggest benefit for your VBRGs and your resources group is going to be internal facing. So what I always challenge people is focus internally, develop a program to help your talent acquisition team hire more veterans, develop a new veteran employee welcome, letter guide, focus on veteran recognition, how you do that, focus on lunch and learns, focus on retention. Now that you've hired them, how do you retain them? Focus on mentorship programs. Focus internally before you go externally. And 99.9% of the VBRGs that I know have gone external first. And the second pitfall is don't get focused on spending money. When the 2 years I ran the UPS VBRG, we had no funds. Atlanta, crazy enough, our charter says we can't collect funds or give funds. So we do everything off of in kind. And guess what? We have quarterly summits at some pretty amazing places where we have up to, 300 to 500 people. We've had a summit as big as 1,200. That was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, focus on in kind versus needing this big budget, and then learn how to say no. So when everybody's very passionate, I always have kings of ideas and no kings of execution. So if somebody comes to you and has these ideas, ask them how they're going to execute those ideas.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's being not only kind of lofty in your ideals, but pragmatic in your in realistic in what you can actually execute, and focus on the execution, which shouldn't be anything new to this military affiliated audience, for sure. So Cappy, like to turn to you if you don't mind. The Walt Disney Company has a long history of supporting military veterans. Can you tell us about how that organizational history, buy-in from leadership, and the company's mission are put into practice when it comes to supporting military veteran employees?
Yeah, you bet, Ben. And first, thank you for having us here today. I mean, it's such an amazing topic, and it's so great to be able to speak to so many people who might be interested in developing their own veteran hiring programs, military spouse hiring programs, enhancing the work experience for those who've given so much in service to our country. So thank you. We really appreciate it. And it's great to meet Lloyd and Niel, because this is going to be just an amazing discussion. I've already loved what Lloyd's saying, and I agree 1,000%. But here at Disney, we are very fortunate to have an organization, a company that has long admired and saluted U.S. military service members, veterans, their families, dating all the way back throughout our 100-year history. And it actually predates the founding of our company in 1923 with a service to country by our own founders, Walt and Roy Disney, during the First World War. And Roy was in the Navy, go Navy, and Walt was too young to join the service, but he was able to just find his own way to serve because the Red Cross was enlisting or accepting young men younger than military age to serve as ambulance drivers in the Red Cross Ambulance Corps. So Walt signed up for that and he deployed to France at the tail end of hostilities. So we have a rich tradition in our company of saluting service. It's a foundational value. It has permeated throughout our entire history, as I said, throughout World War II. For example, the company embarked upon creating logos and insignias for service for units and service branches around the world. Some of them are still in use today, including the third ID, Rocky the Bulldogs, created by Walt Disney Productions in 1965. That program went for about 20 years. So it was really cool to see the West Point cadets wearing Rocky the Bulldog on their helmet during the Army-Navy game last year. It was a terrible outcome. So we're really looking forward to Navy coming on top this year. I think it's going to be awesome. An amazing, it's going to be a great game. But the deal is those are just examples. And so, throughout, and as that tradition continues today, because in 2012, the Walt Disney Company joined many companies that wanted to see what they could do to knock down sky-high veteran unemployment numbers. And so we created a program for Disney known as Heroes Work Here. And since then, we've hired thousands of veterans throughout all parts of our business, a very large company. And we were honored to be able to salute them. And it was great to see, as we started seeing veterans come in larger numbers in 2012, 2013, we wanted to provide that peer-to-peer support network in the form of a veteran employee resource group. So I was honored to be a founding core team member of creating that with about 8 people, 10 people between Walt Disney World and Disneyland, all veterans. And it was great to be able to develop a core charter, which still drives us today, that includes peer-to-peer support. We have all these veterans now in a corporate space. Transitioning is hard. It's an entirely different culture. So how can you actually provide that, as Lloyd said, mentorship to those who, as they're trying to navigate their way through a large corporate environment? So that peer-to-peer support network is incredibly important. Creating a culture inside of a larger Disney family where veterans can come to work, as their authentic selves, having that opportunity, to needle each other, needle each other's service branches as part of our culture. We do it out of the utmost of respect. But it's a lot of fun, and it's part of our culture, and it makes you feel even more part of a team, part of a unit inside of the larger Walt Disney Company. And so that's really important. And the professional development is a big part of that peer-to-peer support network, so that we help our members gain, we're trying to help them with things that we don't really learn in the military, like interviewing skills for jobs, or, the concept of networking. You don't network your way into your next unit. A detailer helps you with that. And then resume writing and things like that to help talent development, help talent mobility. And then we do a lot of community service because veterans want to serve. I mean, it's just, and those, we're open to everyone. Our ERG is open to anyone, whether you served in our nation's armed forces, or you have a close connection to it. You might have a parent have served, sibling might be serving, a son, a daughter, or you might have seen Top Gun Maverick a lot, or read a Clancy book and just really love it. So, but we're absolutely open to everyone, including allies who just have a close affinity for military service. And so we want to harness that. We do, like Lloyd said, we spend a lot of time on that, employee recognition, that peer-to-peer network. Our employees are known as cast members because here at Disney, everyone's part of the show. And but it's also great to channel that energy, get out in the community to veteran nonprofits, like where it makes sense, Orlando Fisher House, USO, Gary Sinise Foundation, and, really try to make a difference. And, because that also helps the employment experience here, because giving back to the community is part of what a veteran and somebody affiliated with the military community is. So it's important. And the great thing is, I know, Ben, you asked about leadership. Leadership support is essential from any organization who's going to have a vibrant veteran ERG. And we're fortunate here at the Walt Disney Company to have a leadership team across our business, many businesses, that recognize that service and saluting those who give so much to our country is a foundational value. So they literally are like, how can we help? And how do we get the word out? How do what more can we do? And that's just a terrific thing.
Yeah, no, thanks. Those are excellent points. And I've seen it myself just, in helping, in part of our philanthropic mission to help veterans find careers that they love, that, having strong ERGs like, the folks on this panel have, is a huge competitive advantage. I think when it comes to recruiting, retaining talent, I see a lot of folks, especially veterans, really do value that sense of community, and especially when there's a strong, employee resource group for sure. And when there's and then, as a recruit, when they're looking at places, it's definitely something that I've seen recruits put a premium on when they're thinking about, what company to go to, and it could be a big sway in their decision to decide to work at company A versus company B is feeling like they're supportive. So, those are things I'm seeing. It definitely seems to align to the things you're saying as well. So, kudos to you all as you build that out with your groups. And then lastly, I'd say, Cappy, there's a common misconception that you need to be a veteran to be in the veteran resource group. Why is it important to have a broader community involved, and how do you message around that?
That's a great question. As I mentioned before, our VRG is open to everyone, and it's great to have that diversity of thoughts, opinions, great ideas on where we should focus our energies inside of our core charter, which I talked about. But it's really important that everyone knows that we're open to everyone, open to anyone, allies, veterans, military family members, etc. The challenge is the communication part. And so, especially with our frontline cast members, who they're out in our theme parks, they're on our cruise ships, they're not sitting on their phone, they're engaging with our guests, they're making magic for them every single day. And so how do we engage with those frontline cast members to make sure that they know that? And we do that in a couple different ways, but one of the things, as they say in Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. So we try to build great programs. We're Disney, so we also try to make many of them fun, so that veterans and military, those in the military community, they like to talk, and they like to share, and so when they share these experiences, they go, well, how do I do that? And then we make it easy for them to find us on our intranet sites, on our Slack channels. And so that's really important. And then also we do executive road shows. We go to different parts of the business to talk about our Disney Salute ERG. What is it? What is a veteran? What do they bring? What can a veteran bring to your work? To your work location in terms of leadership, honor, courage, commitment, teamwork, and then help them get the word out to their folks.
Oh, thanks. Very, very, very helpful sage advice. Niel, it's incredible that you were Amgen's first Hiring Our Heroes Fellow in 2019. You speak to the role programs like SkillBridge that can have on the transition period and how they ideally intersect with organizations' veteran resource groups.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I ran into Amgen at a hiring fair at Fort Cavazos, Texas in 2019. I'd never heard of Amgen. I never thought of myself. I did tanks in the Army. I never thought of myself doing biotech. I mean, my last hard science was in high school. I took rocks for jocks and astronomy in college. So biotech wasn't even on my radar. And I ran into a recruiter in the military program, brought in a couple of people there at the hiring fair, and they kind of got me interested in no, we need program managers, we need supply chain people, we need contract manufacturing people, we need all kinds of skills like you got. And I went, huh. And the funny thing is, I was actually waiting to talk to another company when I just ran by their booth. And so I used the power of LinkedIn to go in, and I looked up a guy named Ben Chu. He's a veteran here. He graduated West Point, had been with Amgen about 20 years, had gotten out as a junior officer. And I sent him a cold email on LinkedIn hey, I ran into your company at a job fair. I'm a retiring lieutenant colonel. I'm really interested in Amgen. I was fascinated by what they said. Can you talk to me about it? He gave me a call. And we spent about an hour. He's just like, Niel, this is the greatest company ever. You're going to love it. You need to try to do it. And so I call up the veteran recruitment person and said, hey, the military's got this new program. I can come work for free for you guys for a couple of months. And I think you're going to love me enough that y'all will hire me. Took about 6 months to get stood up, but came in during basically the end of my service. My chain of command bought off on me doing that. Within 5 weeks, I got hired initially as a program manager inside of our commercial space, later moved on into contract manufacturing, later moved on now into, we're standing up a new site with 3,000 plus people overseas. But basically just managing big things, fighting fires. And that's really sort of been the journey. Now, the neat thing is behind me, we brought over 150 fellows in. We have hired many more, both through Hiring Our Heroes, SkillBridge, and others, and really invigorated veteran hiring. What we find is if we can get the veteran in front of the hiring managers, because they'll look at a resume like mine and say, Niel, great, you've been a lot of places, you've done a lot of things. Thanks for your service. All cool, but what do you know about drug development? And they really don't make the 2 and 2 together from the paper until you're in the office and you're showing that you can lead people, you can organize, you can be of value in meeting, you can ask the right questions, you can make that impact. And they go, wow, I really want that capability. He can learn what he needs to know about this particular function relatively quickly. And I've made this point in several forums. Veterans really have to differentiate. My competition is not that they don't want to hire a veteran. Everybody wants to hire a veteran. They'll tell you like, oh, I'd love to. But when your resume is sitting next to somebody that's been doing the job for 10 or 15 years in that industry with that skill set, you've really got to make a hard differentiation about why they should hire you versus the person that's been in there. I use the analogy. Would I hire a senior manager or director at Amgen to be a tank battalion XO? And you go, I'm sure they're a smart person. They're great. But they'll show up motor pool Monday and won't know which end of the tank goes where. And I pull out the engine and what's an 026 and what's the deadline report and all this other stuff. That's the hurdle they would have to do. And can I afford that onboarding period? So really understanding the business and understanding those challenges, I think, is key.
Oh, that's a great point. It's almost like we're speaking different languages, and there's risks that are associated with those new hires as well. So ERGs, it sounds like, can be a great way to help bridge that gap, and at least trying to translate the languages, so to speak. You've shared that Amgen's VRG was in a bit of a lull when you joined the company. What advice can you share about re-energizing and growing ERG groups? What strategies have been most effective in keeping members engaged and motivated?
I'd say the number one thing is when I got here, the veteran ERG was there, but it really involves engaged leadership like any other volunteer activity you've ever been a part of. And part of it is we started by building community. We started getting the veterans together at the company. Then we started tying that into that veteran hiring piece. We would, for people like me, take those calls in for a veteran, help them network into hiring managers in the places where they're qualified for and become advocates for them. Then when those people joined, it started getting to be a flywheel of doing that. The other thing we messaged is we found out we have a huge, as you were mentioning earlier, you don't have to be a veteran to be a part of a veteran ERG. We started recruiting very heavily into other members of the Amgen community, whether they're just fans of veterans, whether they are have a family member that served, or they got a child or a sibling or whatever. We found a huge community. We started our roster at about 150 in our ERG, and now we're well over 800 and continuing to climb north. And of that, 70-80% of that roster is non-veteran supporters. And we use that roster to help leverage in. I get somebody that wants to come in and wants to join a particular function. We can look them up and say, hey, will you give this interview? I want to connect this veteran with you. They're interested in joining supply chain or contract manufacturing or research and development or this particular function. And we can make that happen with our networks.
That's a great point. I guess, and then I'd open this question up for the broader group, but in many folks on this, in this session, I've spoken to, the VRGs they represent come in many different shapes and sizes. There might be, a very long-standing VRG with a very, deeply structured kind of veteran hiring program, or there might be some that literally were just handed the baton to say, hey, I know you're a veteran and I think we want to hire more, take the helm. I guess, how would you think about, advising some of these folks on some goals and realistic goals and kind of a broader strategy, and let's start with the startup, the one where literally just, you're handed the baton to say, hey, here you go. We know you're a veteran. We'd love to hire more of them. How would you, if you put yourself in those shoes, Cappy, Lloyd, or Niel, how would you kind of develop a game plan?
I love that because I was there. In 2014, they're like, "Hey, do you want to be part of our veteran core team? We're going to create a VRG." We're like, "Great. What do we do?" Well, let's get in a room. Start talking through it. And actually, we did have, there was some guidance from HR in terms of best practices. From several of our other dimension of diversity ERGs. So it was great, but it was a tabula rasa. It was a blank slate. And so, so a lot of it was the focus point was just to get that core mission set nailed down. What do we want to do? And you can't boil the ocean, especially we had, as I said, 8 to 10 people between on a VTC between Anaheim and Disneyland and Orlando with Walt Disney World. And so, so we came up with the mission set of peer-to-peer support network, professional development, community service, and came up with, and then, gosh, we spent an entire day coming up with a name. Like, hey, what about this name and that name? And it was really fun to come up with that. We ended up with Disney Salute because obviously it's a very military-centric gesture, which is a form of greeting. It's a form of respect. And it makes sense and baked into the logo. And the logo is important. It's not much like UPS's logo, FedEx logo, any logo is really important because it can say things. And so our logo says Disney Salute, and underneath it, it says veterans and friends and family of veterans. So, even that is just a reinforcement of what the group, of who you are. So once you have that, and here we are 10 years later, and we have over 3,000 members. We have chapters, almost like the VFW. We have like chapters. So we have the Florida site chapter, which I have the honor of being a co-chair of, which is over 20, I think over 2,000 members just here alone because it represents Walt Disney World. It represents all of our 8 different businesses and Disney signature experiences, which includes Disney Vacation Club, Disney Cruise Line, and many others. But we also have a lot of what's corporate community, TW, enterprise level, Disney enterprise level employees who work here in Florida as well. So we represent all of those groups. But we have a chapter in Bristol, Connecticut, for the ESPN. So ESPN salutes. We have a Disneyland salute. We have now we're working on a Lani salute. We've got our resort in Hawaii, in Oahu. And, we have a salute chapter in Burbank, Glendale, Los Angeles area. And so some of that, so you can't boil the water, but if you start small with what you're trying to accomplish and stay true to those 3 principles, and as Lloyd said, sometimes you got to say no. If it's outside the scope of those key mission sets, grow, do what you do well, focus on those areas, and then also collaborate to make sure there's great communication alignment with your different, chapters. Over time, it can really grow into something that is very, very meaningful and helpful to your employees.
That's a great point. I love how you kind of decentralize it with the chapter support instead of just make it totally centralized just from one location. Lloyd, Niel, anything else you'd like to share?
Kind of like Cappy. Go ahead, Lloyd. You take it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Align with your company's goals. And the more you can align with your company's goals, the more support you're going to get.
I was just going to say, a lot like Cappy, we got 12 different chapters spread out around the globe right now in all of our different sites, our manufacturing sites, our business sites, our research sites. We've really expanded with that. But one thing, we've aligned against 3 basic priorities. And the third one I'll talk about was very important, and our CEO challenged us for this, who's been a big supporter. Number 1, we look at veteran hiring and veteran career success is one thing. Veteran connection is the second thing. Really, connecting the vets and the company. But the third thing is veteran impact. Thank you for your service will only get you so far in veteran hiring. You can't really approach a civilian company and say, hire me because I served. You might get a little bit of traction with that, but ultimately you've got to deliver the impact to the business. And the best way we've been able to expand the number of veterans hired, we've been able to expand our membership, and the rest of it is showing that veterans, when they join the company, are really effective, really quickly, and quickly become the leaders in whatever groups they join, to where those hiring managers become the advocates for it. Give me some more. Or yes, I had a great experience hiring a veteran into this. So that's the big piece I would say, is that look at the veteran impact in your organization and make sure you're highlighting that and featuring that.
That's an excellent point, and and I like what Lloyd and said as well about aligning to the company's overall goals, because we're not doing that. What are we doing? So that's a great point. Into a theme of connecting what and managing, maybe management about kind of why the VRGs exist, why does it make sense. And then I guess Lloyd, you touched on this. I'd love to also go into it a little bit more with being creative with resources, right? So being in the military, we obviously do more with less. We've learned how to be creative, and in how you've been able to share a little bit about finding new and unique ways to gather some more support and resources for UPS, but also Atlanta. Is that something that Cappy, Niel, you all can speak to as well, Lloyd, and chime in to help some of these groups to say, well, I've got my group today, and we've been around for a year or two, but man, it'd be really nice if I had $50,000 more to hire another talent acquisition person or go to 4 or 5 more events. How do you think about that, and maybe some creative ideas or best practices for gathering resources to continue your mission?
We went through something like that. About a year ago, they eliminated the position of the dedicated veteran recruiter that we had as a series of restructurings that we had. Took me about a year, but as a veteran ERG lead, I ultimately got one of our senior leaders of the company, one of our executive vice presidents, offered to make sure that role was funded, and we got that back in the company. So a lot of that, though, had to do with demonstrating the veteran impact. This is a good corporate decision for the company on a lot of levels, to have somebody that specializes in bringing in and onboarding veteran talent and helping communicate their value or their relevance to the various roles we have posted. So I'd say one thing I've been very fortunate with at Amgen is our CEO, our C staff have all, one advantage you have as an ERG leader, ideally, is that you're able to dialogue with them on a level, even though they're 3-4 levels up from where you work at in the organization. Every EVP in the company knows who I am, knows that Niel's going to come talk about veterans. I can call them up and say, hey, I would really like some help doing this, and I will get a hearing. And you got to use that very diplomatically, very sparingly. But with that, sometimes, the middle tiers, you've got to go up there and get that executive support to do that. But you can only do that if you've got credibility with what you're trying to represent.
I would mirror that. I mean, that was terrific. Funding is always going to be an issue, but I would say success creates more success. You know what I mean? And communication, no surprises. And so, and Disney is very, committed to supporting, all of our dimensions of diversity, all our various ERGs. And so there are, pots of money for each of them, obviously, but your ambitions to do things sometimes outstrip the resources you have. So the deal is, if you communicate saying this is the reason why we want to do it, have the credibility, as Niel said, explain the why, and then also share, what the results were after the fact, and here's something that we might want to build on in the future. A lot of times, you're able to find those resources, especially if you have, leadership support.
Yeah. And then I would say as well, stuff that has been shared with me is just finding maybe great veteran service organizations or some nonprofits that could assist, as well, to help kind of further the reach, whether it be, marketing the job opportunities to a wider audience, et cetera. So, a lot of it's, maybe thinking about what we can do internally, and always make the case to kind of gather more resources internally. But there might be opportunities kind of external to your firms to find ways to partner in that aspect. And so I've seen that time and time again, and it seems like Lloyd's been able to do that as well with Vetlanta. Find other folks. That's probably one of the best practices I've seen in creating not just an industry or a sector, group bringing everybody together in the veteran community, but also geographic wise. So I thought that was very creative and interesting. And
Yeah, and I would sometimes, I mean, a lot can be done with no limited resources. So for example, the if anybody's been to Disney in the Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, we have a daily flag ceremony. It's known as the flag retreat, where we retire the colors of our nation. The ceremony is a little bit different from the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland, but the sentiment of honoring service is rings loudly. And so at Magic Kingdom, the way they approach it is they select a guest who walks through the gates every day. They'll look at somebody who may be military bearing, veteran bald cap, Air Force T-shirt, and they'll approach them and just talk to them about their service. And then, a lot of times it leads to that person being selected as the veteran of the day in the Magic Kingdom. And then they retire the flag at the flag retreat ceremony with our marching band and the Dapper Dans performing and guests sitting around. It's really special. And then they get to parade the cased colors down Main Street, USA, as guests just thank them for their service loudly. And it's really very, it's really just so inspiring. So Veterans Day, we get to, and so in terms of resources, we're like, how can we honor our employees, known as cast members, who have worn the cloth of our nation? And, so here at the Florida site, we select 4 veterans employees, and they represent our, all the cast members as our Veterans of the Year. And on Veterans Day, we reserve that day to honor a cast member who is a veteran in the Magic Kingdom. And it's extra special. Their families there, their leaders are there. And so even today, so I get back to resources. So that doesn't cost, there's minimal cost for that. But then, we're doing kind of Ed McMahon surprise moments to those 4 veterans. So I went to the workspace backstage at Epcot today, and we selected, a Air Force veteran who's been with the company about a year, and she came in via SkillBridge, which is really cool. So she did a fellowship with us that translated into a permanent position. And we went in there and, built a piece of paper, had one of my staffers build on PowerPoint, a beautiful certificate, very colorful. And you're the veteran of the day. It's a piece of paper on cardstock, but it means something. It is very meaningful. You know what I mean? Put it in a nice folder, bring challenge coins and some other things. And then, in and amongst her leadership, announce that she is one of our honorees this year. It doesn't cost anything, really. And so that recognition in front of your peers and your leadership team goes a long way. And so, in terms of resources, you can be creative without, having a whole bucket of gold.
I love to hear it. And there you go, audience. That's, another shining example of Disney's creativity, adding a smile to someone's face. We have a question from the audience from Megan Weiss. She asked, can you share any examples of partnerships or collaborations with external organizations that have benefited your veteran resource groups?
I'd love to take that one, Ben. So I challenge everybody to look in their local community before they go to a national organization, because there's so many good local, smaller VSOs that you can partner with. One of the big ones here in Atlanta was Veterans Empowerment Organization, or VEO. It's a homeless shelter on the west side in Atlanta. And we were able to, not only we as in UPS, but all the corporate VRGs in the area were able to engage with them. And it was a win-win situation. Another one, we used to have a great local chapter of Soldiers Angels. And the great thing about both of those organizations was they weren't looking for money. Yeah, they would love to have a grant, don't get me wrong, but their initial engagement was volunteerism. So really encourage everybody to skip the grant process at first and focus on organizations that want your VRG to volunteer.
I'll second that. I'm on the board of Gold Coast Veterans Foundation, which is a local charity here in Ventura County, California. Deals with veteran homelessness, veterans who are insecure, food insecurity, housing insecure, things of that nature. We've developed a partnership with Amgen. As you highlighted, most companies like to deal in the local community. We're not a big national charity. We're hyper local and able to do that. And I'm taking over as the chair this year. And so those partnerships with veteran ERGs around the county are really important to us. On a second note, kind of to answer your question in a different way, Megan, we've used other nonprofits. I'll use the example. There's an organization out there called Next Stop Vets, which is looking to place veterans into manufacturing roles. And I've actually struggled as a veteran ERG leader to get veterans to come into our entry-level manufacturing roles. People think manufacturing, you're thinking like this steam rising, banging the steel type things. I'm talking biotech manufacturing. I'm talking jobs where the salary starts, well north of 70, 80 grand a year for an entry level position that doesn't require a college degree, and so they're working with us as a partnership. They've got a pipeline of technically minded vets coming out of the service. We've arranged with the hiring managers are very eager to have the veterans because look, they say, I'd rather have them than the new college graduates coming out because they understand discipline. They know how to show up on time. They know how to lead people. They know how to technically diagnose things, and they're very practical. And that's been a tremendous partnership for us. So looking around at the synergies you can do with various other organizations and nonprofits is absolutely a game changer at all of our sites.
That's a great point. I would just say as well.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say as well, I've put on my philanthropy hat. I've seen Vet Jobs as a tremendous nonprofit that's built a community of, I think, over 300,000 military veterans and spouses that are, it's a nonprofit. It doesn't charge anything for the candidate, doesn't charge anything for the company, and it just helps give your talent acquisition teams incredible reach into not necessarily a West Point or Naval Academy community like myself that doesn't really represent the military, but mostly like former enlisted. And I think they've gotten folks hired at all the folks that are represented on the panel. So another free resource that can really help take your talent acquisition capabilities to the next level. And it's free. Sorry, Cappy, go ahead.
No, this is great, Ben. I was going to say for us, one of the ones that is extra special for us is the Fisher House Foundation, which is local and national. And so, we've had, we at Disney have, an enduring relationship with the Fishers, who are just amazing. As for the audience who may not know them, they're like a Ronald McDonald House for veteran and military families that provide them a free place to stay in a house, not a hotel. 16-room house that's adjacent to either a big, large-scale VA hospital or a major military medical center. And so it's a place of refuge and a place to, medical bills will run up pretty quickly if you're trying to be there with a loved one and staying at a hotel. So it's an amazing organization. And so from a local perspective, Orlando Fisher House, the Walt Disney World team donated beautiful holiday decorations from our resort that, to really make that place so magical and go out there every year and do it. But the thing is, we've also, that relationship has also grown to a national level because there's 97, now soon to be 100 Fisher houses. So they're located all across the nation, including Hawaii, Alaska, and a couple overseas. And so, we've done national care package deliveries to them of Disney consumer products so we can help bring a smile, bring some joy to those going through some tough times. And that's part of our charter, even from a company perspective. How do we leverage our resources as a company to support those who serve? And a lot of it is how do we bring joy? I mentioned that. joy and happiness, and being a champion for veteran hiring. The joy and happiness bucket, we did that to be able to bring a smile to those who give so much in service to our nation at a low point. And our volunteers from various salute chapters nationwide were hand delivering it. So it added to that salute to service while also benefiting the company from one of our key mission sets. So that's another great organization that is always worthy of support.
Awesome. And I think we'll take one more question and then kind of wrap things up. Really appreciate everyone's time. But I guess, to the panelists, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the audience about VRGs and best practices or lessons learned? If there was one or two things you would share for the group that hasn't been mentioned yet, what would you say?
So Ben, I just caution everybody to really do their homework. I give a speech on veteran charities, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there's a lot of good out there. There's a lot of bad. I define the bad as an organization that might be focused too much on fundraising versus providing service deliverables. And then there's the ugly, the fraudsters, scammers, and schemers out there. And unfortunately, a lot of those fraudsters, scammers, and schemers are fellow veterans. So do your homework, ask other VBRGs, touch base with me on LinkedIn. Charity Navigators is a great resource. I'm telling you, these folks that are out there are prevalent. They want to steal your time, your money, and your identity. So just be cautious.
Great point. And that's part of bringing the community together as well to kind of help y'all advise, maybe thinking about things and sharing best practices in the philanthropy space as well. Niel, Cappy.
I'd just say a couple things. Number one, find your veteran connections. Very important. You'll find people, if you ask around for the veteran space, that are looking to get involved. The other advice, though, that was given to me when I took over global chair of AVEN, and the rest of it is very important to focus on your day job first. You can't do a lot of good in your ERG if you're not performing well at the office and your reputation isn't stellar and you're not getting that recognition. What gives the veterans here a lot of credit is the impact we're making, the number of key positions we occupy, the number of the business impact we're giving. So that's number one thing. And then just go out and ask and recruit and see who's out there. That's literally how we've grown, is sort of organically like that. Third thing I'd say is just think of some high impact events you can do. We have an annual Veterans Day ceremony that is done virtually now, has had over 800 attendees. We've reached for the stars in our attendees. We've had Johnny Kim, who's a NASA astronaut, medical doctor, Navy SEAL. We've had Robert De Niro show up. We've had Katie Higgins Cook, the first female Blue Angel. We've got Megan Stockwell, who's a Paralympic athlete, lost a leg in Iraq, coming to talk this year. We've had Greg Gadsden, who you've seen in the movies, another wounded warrior. Those things attract a lot of people and get us a lot of members.
Awesome.
I love that. I mean, and we do, that's aspirational. So, we definitely should work towards that for sure. And we've had a couple of great speakers, someone like Rob Jones, at a webinar that reaches all of our remote sites. Rob Jones is a amputee, double amputee, lost both legs. And I think it was an EOD in Afghanistan. But then he came back and he said, he's so inspired at Bethesda that, by other wounded warriors, that he's like, you know what, I'm going to rehab, and I'm going to learn these prosthetics, and I'm going to run 31 marathons in 31 days. And he did. And so, bringing things like that about resilience, or professional development and those kind of speakers, people from the VA, cost anything, but here's a presentation by the VA to benefits that you may not know that you're eligible for, especially a veteran who may have served 2 years. They say, well, I'm not really worth it. Like, no, breaking that mindset. So I would say, shoot for the stars, but also sometimes you can just get together and foster that sense of camaraderie inside of your organization, with a webinar, Zoom call, buddy check, or just go out, hey, let's go for a social, no cost, no host, and share stories. And it's that building and fostering that community, that sense of community in a veteran ERG inside of a larger organization goes a long way.
That's excellent points all around, and you definitely see that with the military. There's so many great values and experiences that I think we've all enjoyed and touched upon in this talk, and that sense of community is something that I think is really makes the military that much more special. Even though in certain days in December we kind of want one football team to win versus another, but that's neither here nor there. But hey, thank you.
Navy. You want Navy, right, Ben?
Exactly. We're both, the good guys and the bad guys are both undefeated. Air Force are, as long as they're not winning the Commanders and Chiefs trophy, they're good guys in my book. But
part of that is the needling that goes in front of it, but then also at the end of it, that sense of sportsmanship and
right.
the fact that the recognition that they will all be standing shoulder to shoulder, defending a great nation soon after, and that's pretty special.
Couldn't agree more. So, for the audience, thank you everyone for attending. Really interesting conversation, good takeaways from our esteemed panelists. We're so fortunate to have them and share their experiences, and hopefully that we can keep the conversation going. Right. Really encourage everyone on here to connect with myself, connect with the panelists, connect with each other, and we'd love to keep the conversation going. In the next week or so, we'll send you all a recap of today's events and a video recording that you can continue to utilize as you build out your VRGs, and we'll also share contact information of everyone who was here today with your permission, of course. And so have a great rest of your afternoon, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. You're not alone. There's a lot of folks that have been in your seat before and really excited. I think the real special thing about the military community are the people in it. And it's just, even though we're working in, different areas of the country, different sectors, we all have that shared, appreciation and love of military service that I think has really, paid dividends for myself. It sounds like a lot of the panelists as well. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Aim high.
See you guys.